For the next video in my earthworks vegetation series, I'm looking at procedural content generation and the way that I use mathematics, noise textures, and meshes to place vegetation at runtime. A medium-sized world like this one, at 40 by 40 kilometers, has about 5 billion clumps of these tall outgrasses, and probably 1 trillion of small grasses and weeds. You simply have to place them procedurally. So for the last 2 weeks, I took a break from my vegetation editor to integrate this with the terrain. After all, this is why I was making the plants. This is an overview video, and to keep it shorter, I will have to skip over some of the details. I'm going to start by looking at ecotopes and the mathematics that I use to assign them to the terrain. Then move to Terrafectors, a system of meshes and materials that render into the terrain with the ability to modify albedo, texture, elevation, the PBR values, as well as all the plants. I will concentrate on stamps and roads since both are placed in the editor, and leave general meshes for a separate video. Ecotope, an area of uniform climatological and soil conditions. My current renderer allows for 12 separate ecotopes. You can think of these as splat maps, but having 12 of them, and each individual one really just calculates the probability that the specific set of plants and soil conditions will occur at a given spot. I've already set up all 12 in this scene, and I'm going to concentrate on 2 of them, meadow shortgrass and meadow longgrass, for the sake of this presentation. Let's jump to meadow shortgrass and turn on the debug mode to explain this further. Debug mode will color the scene depending on the probability that this will, the specific ecotope will occur in a given area. And you can see that on the flat ground down here, there's quite a lot of it occurring. On a lot of the mountainside, there's very little. This is split into 2 separate groupings. The one you can see above there is slow based, and that's the really steep rocky faces. And the other one over here is all the forests. Forests are placed in a separate map, and I will touch on that when we do stamp pads. You can think of this as it's just a map that tells the world that certain areas of forest, and you can see that I've got 3 separate types of forest set up for this map. If we zoom in on an area, let's just pick anywhere over here, and we zoom in quite close, you can see that that the heat map predicts this. And what we have to modify that, the first element is we have height, and this is above sea level. Currently, this is actually set up to clip a little bit on higher altitudes, but let's set this really hard, and we drag that top value down to about, that's a little bit, let's drag the smoothest down. We create a really hard edge, and we slide this upwards. Actually, let's just see, we are at, that's quite interesting. 1,000. Let's move that to 1,100 meters, and there you can actually see it quite clearly. So there's an absolute line up there where this simply cannot, this grass now cannot grow above that level. I'm actually going to take it out because it really shouldn't. We do want some of it higher up, and I won't save what I do here. The second value is concavity, and as you can see, we don't have much set up. I will see if I can let's hop to I think meadow flowers have a lot of concavity setup. Yes, it has a lot of concavity setup, and you can see it over here. So it actually excludes the river, the valley sections, and it keeps the ridge lines. So concavity tells you, are we inside of valleys? Are we on ridge lines? With a whole host of ways that we can modify that. The third value is slope. So if I go back to meadow shortgrass and we go to these ridge lines over here, you can see that they are extremely steep. And my slope value, if I remove it completely, completely, suddenly we have tons of grass growing on this. But if I do enable slope, we exclude all of the really, really steep angles from having any grass on them. The next one is aspect, and for this I would have to go quite a bit to the top, turn it all on, and let's just make that 1. So now this is the direction that these slopes are facing. So now we're only doing south facing slopes, so slopes that get a lot more sunlight. But I can also just do the complete opposite and pick all of the north facing slopes in a scene. But for this specific ecotope, aspect should play a very small role, but still slightly biased to southern slopes. And the very last value that we have is texture. And this just gives us the ability to break it all up. You can see that I've loaded a noise texture up there, and this we can scale and rotate this texture to get specific values. For this grass, it's less important. If we hop over to meadow long grass, all of a sudden that texture becomes critical, because this is what gives us our clumping effect. You can see that we have a lovely clump of outgrass over here with almost nothing in between, and that clump perfectly coincides with the heat map. And while the other parameters gives the generalized area where outgrass can grow in the Alps, it's the texture value that gives us this lovely clumping effect over here. If we just turn the debug view off, get rid of the heat map, you can really appreciate the clumping effect and how much it contributes to the scene. I think that is one part of them, and then the other thing, the other two parts, you can see that there's an albedo texture. So each of these have an albedo texture, and that gives us our ground color underneath. This it also includes, I see this one is not loaded, but it can include a displacement and a roughness map, so we can actually displace the ground using the ecotopes. And then the very last thing is and includes the plants. So we are in meadow long grass, and it has outgrass assigned to level of detail 10, and that's just the very first level of detail at which it will be included. We've got a relative density, so how tightly is it packed relative to the plant's own size, and variance. If we hop to meadow short grass, you will see, in fact, I used to have outgrass in here, but I just dropped the density down to 0 to create this. But it's got weed and these small little grasses as clumps. So if I zoom in there, yes, this is just turn that off again. So if I zoom in over here, we've got little weeds and grasses and no outgrass in the section. And that is roughly what Ecotopes does for us. Let me get on to the Terrafector section and see what else we can do with this. Stamps. Terrafectors are a collection of mesh tools that I have, meshes and materials. And I will get to the materials in a second. And we can use these to modify the terrain in a number of ways. We can modify the albedo and PBR values, so the way that it looks, the elevation data, but also all of the ecotopes. Stamps is the most primitive of all of these, but a really nice way. So every single material added into the system, on the left here we have a whole bunch of materials added. Every single one of these materials also act as a stamp. So I can select from my Swiss road markings folder the bicycle tool and say, well, this will definitely confuse the bus driver, but I do want another bicycle stamp over here on the road. And all that did for us is it simply painted, this is really just a paint texture, and it simply painted that. But I'm going to misuse the bus texture to explain some things quickly. And let's just, for the fun of it, just rotate it. And we're going to go and paint. We can go and stamp this bus stamp on the side over here and stamp that down. So let's just move to my Terrafector view, to the material view. But I'm going to come over here, and the first thing you can see is that obviously a very rough, eroded paint. It's not very solid, but you can start to see that it did remove some of the plants. This is because the alpha mask for this isn't extremely solid. There's actually a mask texture, but also detail texture added to this, and that's what the detail texture looks like to give it that paint effect. For the sake of this, I'm going to quickly mess around and just make this significantly more solid. I do think that might work already. You can see that as I'm editing the material, the terrain will update automatically. Let's actually just take the detail texture out completely. And now it's solid, and you can see that all of the plants have disappeared. This is because in its Ecotopes system, in its culling mode, this texture is set up to cull all of the plants where it applies. Well, or a percentage of the plants relative to the alpha mask that we've applied for it. I will get in, I'll touch on this a little bit in a second. So this gives us really amazing ways to quickly and efficiently edit the terrain and add interesting features. Tire tracks, you can have a car run off and plow through this, or almost anything you can think of, but definitely building things. On the albedo and PBR side, you can see that this has paint rough is very uninteresting, but we can at least make this let's make this quite dark and slightly reddish, and then just hop to the elevation tab. So on the elevation side, we can load a, what does it have? Oh, it has paint roughness. But with 0 scale. So let's first add that in. So it actually has a bit of a roughness texture. I'm going to drag the slider up a little. That is, what is that? That's 4 centimeters. That's still very, very, very little roughness. Let's just drag this nice and, there, okay, there it starts to happen. This, I think it's this, let me just see, this texture. Yes, it's an extremely bland texture I have assigned to this. But you can start to drag up this texture, and you can see that it now also impacts elevation data onto the world here. And we also have a height offset. It's currently offset slightly upwards, but I can decide to sync this in and go negative, let's go 25 millimeters down. That's actually very little. Let's just be silly and go 12 centimeters down. This doesn't look great because it's a very, very hard edge, but you can see how easy it is to just play with these textures interactively, see what they do, how they change. I mean, don't do it because we've also now dug holes in the tarmac. I'm absolutely not saving this. But the part that I love, and this is one of the very, very big reasons why I went and built individual little plants. So unlike almost every game in Unreal or Unity that you're going to see that builds these big meter by meter grass meshes for performance, I've gone and made specific individual plants because I can cull them at this level and have just little bits of grass on small bits of ground like that and create really, really amazing effects. So PBR porosity, that will change how much this color changes when it gets wet, etc. The stamp information just tells you when you use this material as a stamp what is its world size. I'm not going to go into the detail of it, but all materials have both a mesh scale UV map and a separate world size UV map, and you can see that in almost all of these we can always set 2 textures, a base texture and the detail texture is turned off, but let's turn the detail base texture and a detail texture. In fact, that makes this a little bit silly. Let's just turn that back off. But the same is true over here for the albedo. You can have a base texture in UV scale and a detail texture that is in world scale. Um, so using world sizes for that. Um, Elevation can be absolute or relative. But I think I will delve into that in a wider Terrafector demo. And then, as I said with Ecotopes, for each of these, you can say in the final result, um, for elevation, color, and for Ecotope, exactly which of these two should control it. Currently, they're dragged onto Terrafector, meaning that this result is final. But you could drag them over to Ecotope. I would have to set that up specifically, but you could drag them over, meaning that this is purely a hint to the mathematical system. And instead of taking this as an absolute value, it will just nudge my mathematical values that I discussed earlier by about this amount. The other thing you can do is include a texture here. And here I've got a mapping system where you can map red, green, and blue in this texture to any of these colors. Currently, and this is the reason why it is clearing, you can see that this is set. If none is set, it's a blank white texture. All of this is mapped to gravel, and gravel currently is empty. So there's absolutely nothing happening in gravel, and you get this sort of effect. Um, and I think that is about as much as I want to do for stamps for the moment. Roads. So Roads is a specialized spline-based tool that I wrote to allow me to quickly add pretty convincing roads into these worlds of mine. It includes banking, flattening, multiple lanes, multiple materials already that can be set up. Um, and especially for high quality LiDAR data like this, if you look at that, in the LiDAR data, that cut and fill already exists. This road is actually pretty well defined for a tiny little mountain road in the Swiss Alps. So let's, as an example, build this quickly. I'm going to press G, start a new road. Just going to start down here, drag in a couple of splines. I just want to do a, let's start with just do a select all. I just want to add some material to this. This is a pre-setup that I have and just makes things easier. And we can see that the current road is quite a bit too wide for what we're up to. So we quickly go there on lane 1. So all of the green is the left-hand lanes and all of the bright is the right-hand lanes. And I go here and I just make this significant bit narrower. And on the right-hand lane, there's lane 1 on the right-hand side. I make that a significant bit narrower. And while I'm at it, you can see that there are this complete outside, the whole clearing section, etc. They are there to both clear vegetation and also to do my cut and fills for me, which I will demonstrate in a second. So this is not too bad. I'm not going to go into the details of all of this, but let's just drag that along a bit. Over here, we probably need 2 sections like that. I'll come back in there in a second and finish it up. We're gonna do this. Let's do 2 or 3 more turns, but not too much. Quick edit here to clean it all up. And stuff. It's clear that we actually need an extra point in the middle, just not enough control over there. And what we typically have on roads like this is that for corners like this, they tend to widen it to make sure that we can that cars can successfully cross. So we will simply widen the road a slight bit here in the corner. Same for the outside lane. Just give it a little bit more width over there, also for the entry. Quick check for the camber. That looks good. All the way up looks good. I'm actually gonna do something about this in a second. Let's just pick a spot. Let's just at the bottom here, let's just mess up a spot. I'm going to pick this one. So there's a couple of things I can do now. It selected the camber and everything from the LiDAR data automatically for me. You can see there that it's at -2 degrees, but I can easily change this. I can decide either that there's a bug in the underlying LiDAR data and I need to change it, or do this for effect. Let's just go the other way. I'm going to do at least one silly one over here for camber, and then the other thing you can do, and you can do the same for height. So we're going to lift up a section over here, and we're going to take that one and sink it down into the terrain, and I think that should do it. So let's just press escape, and we're going to bake this road into the terrain and see what we have. So over here where we dropped it down, you can see that it carved a pretty neat ditch for us. Oh no, that was very, very silly, and now I can't remember where it was. It was up on this slope somewhere. Does that look like it? No, it doesn't. Oh no, where was I? Hang on. I know exactly. Just turn the baking. If I turn the baking off, it should. It was definitely. It was one of these two slopes. Is it this one? Almost looks like it. No, it's not that slope. This is embarrassing. I've lost my road. Oh, here it is. Quite embarrassing. Okay, if we are back here, we're back on baking. I'm going to turn the icons off because we're not editing this right now. This is the little spot where we edited the camber, and you can see that it's leaning quite a bit to the outside. Ooh, there is a lot of curvature applied. That is I'm not going to go into the details. You can specify the amount of curvature on this road. Also, I think these lines really don't fit the road as is. But the one nice thing that you can see is all of a sudden all of that vegetation has disappeared. The road automatically understands to delete this. The verges aren't set up, so I can set them up to clear only big plants and leave small grasses. So it would remove the outgrass, but it would leave all of these, etc. And over here as well. Yes. Anyway, it does a pretty neat job, and I think this is about as much as I'm going to say about roads right now. Apart from this is really easy, intersection tools are included. And the part that I'm skipping is that there's also just stock standard Terrafectors. You can select any piece of terrain over here, export that to Blender or anything else. It's a FBX export. Build any mesh that you want in the tool of your choice and re-import that back into the world, and it will shape the terrain that you have. The way to go from here. There are so many low-hanging fruit that I would really love to tackle. The one you can see is really clear in this scene, and that is that my medium level shadows are just not there. I've got the long range shadows that mountains cast into the atmosphere and onto other pieces of terrain, but you can see that none of the houses are currently casting shadow. I switched base rendering engine recently, and I haven't pulled everything across yet. There's also all sorts of floating point area. You might have noticed, and you can go back and look at it if you're interested. The animation quality in these videos are poor, and it boils down to to floating point rounding errors. The world is just too big, and 1 millimeter error sounds like absolutely nothing when you think of this and you think of the placement of a plant. If the center of that plant is a millimeter off, you wouldn't even think about it. But blow some wind over a grass blade, and the vertices have a millimeter jitter on them, and it looks horrendous. So obviously there's some large world tools that need to be added to the code. Not too big. But the reality is that in the beginning of June, I left my pine trees alone. And that is going to haunt me. And I simply have to go back and get back to pine trees. There's quite a bit of work left. I know exactly what I need to do to get the trees working really, really well. And for anybody who didn't watch the pine tree video, welcome to go back to it. But my conclusion was that trees are simply too large. So when you get close to them, most of the tree is outside of your field of view. And while the near branches should be at really high resolution, the branches at the far side of the tree are still 10 or 15 meters away from you and should be a lot lower. So without splitting the tree into many subsets that can be culled and lodded independently, it's just not possible. And the only really hard part there is to get the animations correct. Currently, all of these wind-driven animations runs in a vertex shader, but all of a sudden you have to run the same animation across multiple shaders and multiple parts, um, and they have to match up accurately enough that when you get that level of detail change from a single tree in the distance to a tree that's split up into, let's say, 200, a trunk and 200 branches, um, that the animation is all in sync. So I suspect that it will take me 2 or 3 weeks at the least, and that is likely when I'll make my next video. For all of you who stayed for the whole video, awesome. I hope it was interesting. Please ask if there's anything you are interested in, or if there's anything specifically you want to see in the next video. And thanks for watching.